Yo, what's up? After 8 months of waiting and seriously doubting that this item even exists in the first place, it's finally here. The Tilta ring for the DJI RS2. And I can't wait to use this because I've been waiting for this forever. So how about we do a quick unboxing of the entire setup. And there it is. Let's actually try this out. Let's go.
Mami, muévete, que tu avalao te ha dicho otra vez que tu mala santa ya sabe cómo es, y la santa canta a todo el mundo de pie. Mami, muévete, que tu avalao te ha dicho otra vez que tu mala santa ya sabe cómo es, y la santa canta a todo el mundo de pie. Ay, nena, no te va, ay, no te va. Mueve tu cintura, ahí nada más. Muévete pa'lante, después pa' atrás. Acércate bonita, quédate acá. Muévete, que tu avalao te ha dicho otra vez que tu mala santa ya sabe cómo es, y la santa canta a todo el mundo de pie. Mami, muévete, que tu avalao te ha dicho otra vez que tu mala santa ya sabe cómo es.
Okay, so no time wasted at all. I took my friends Maria, Tanya, and my new friend Franco, who was so kind to film a little bit of behind the scenes for this review and wanted to test the new RS2 with the new ring. And I've been waiting for this for so long. As you've been following this channel for a while, you know that I already did a DJI RS2 review part 1. I also did a review part 2. So if you're interested in that kind of thing and also how the RS2 works with the C300 Mark III in general and why I don't use the original baseplate and switched it out to a new extended baseplate from SmallRig, make sure to check out the part 1 and part 2 video first. Links are down in the description below. But now that I have almost everything, and I don't have everything yet, but I will talk about this in a minute, I will give you a quick review of the handling of the ring, why I even use that ring, do I like it, do I recommend it, and more on that after the intro. My name is Damien Cooper and welcome to Monkey Face. Before I get into the actual review, let me tell you why I prefer a ring setup over a traditional one-handed gimbal setup. Honestly, I was never a fan of one-handed gimbals in general. I think they're awkward to hold. You don't really have the necessary weight distribution to carry larger cameras for a longer time, and I always find it a little bit exhausting. Also, with the new design that the Zeapon crane introduced with the back handle, I think it's gotten a little bit better, but overall, I still don't like the way that the weight is distributed. And number 2 why I prefer a ring setup, and that might actually be the bigger reason for me personally, is mounting options. With a one-handed gimbal, it's really hard to mount an external monitor to it, or a microphone, or even other accessories. And with a ring setup, you have so many different mounting options that you can basically attach numerous different things, like an external microphone, an external monitor, or even 2 if you want to have somebody pull focus, or a director's monitor on top of that. You can even mount an external audio recorder or wireless HDMI transmitters. So this gives you so much more flexibility when it comes to attaching stuff to your camera. So I have been using ring setups ever since I got my first original DJI Ronin, and unfortunately all the newer gimbals don't really come with a dedicated ring setup unless you go to some third parties and get a generic one, which I've also done some reviews on this channel, and they're better than not having a ring at all, but it's usually a huge thing, it's really heavy, and you can just tell that it's not made for the gimbal. So when Tilta announced their official cooperation with DJI and that they want to bring out a ring setup that is actually made for the DJI RS2, that was reason enough for me to buy the DJI RS2 as well as order the ring setup. So now let's get into the ring itself. I got the basic version. Why did I get the basic version? The advanced version has a remote handle to control the gimbal, which I actually liked, which I ordered as well, but unfortunately that one hasn't arrived yet. But it also comes with a V-mount battery plate on the bottom, so you could power your camera, which is really helpful for a Blackmagic Pocket 6K, for example, or other cameras that don't really have enough battery juice. For me personally, I didn't really think that this was necessary because the battery power of the Canon Z300 Mark III or the EOS R5, which is the other camera I would be using this ring setup with, is usually way sufficient, and a V-mount setup would make the entire thing just a lot heavier. The advanced version also comes with a follow focus remote, and that one I didn't need either because, like I said, I'm shooting with the Canon Z300 as well as the EOS R5, and I like to rely on autofocus when I'm shooting on a gimbal. I tried shooting on a gimbal and pull focus manually with a Blackmagic Pocket 6K, but overall it's a really big hassle and a lot of stress. So since I have cameras with a really good autofocus, I just like to use that one. So there was one item that I didn't need. So I just went for the basic ring as well as the remote handle that isn't here yet. The basic version that I got the ring itself. It also has some generic handles, but it also features all the electronics that you can find on the advanced version as well. So you can buy all the accessories separately and just basically build out your ring setup that is right for you. And since a couple of you asked before, it also comes with an attachment for the top handle. And that is one thing that is really cool because the top handle is also the original battery grip from the DJI RS2. So you mount the gimbal itself on the bottom of the ring, and then you take the original grip and mount it as a top handle. And that is a very smart solution because now the ring actually powers the gimbal via the original handle, and it also doubles as a top handle. And that makes the entire setup so much more compact and also a lot lighter. Speaking of lighter, the entire thing weighs hardly anything. That is the lightest ring that I have ever used, and that is something that I really like, especially when shooting with the Canon Z300 on a gimbal for a longer period of time. It can be pretty exhausting, but this gimbal setup is very light. Since I was talking about mounting options before, I already have another generic ring. Unfortunately, this one was too small for all of the original DJI Ronin clamps that I already had. So with this one, they actually work. So now I can use all of the accessories that I had from before, from my original DJI Ronin, and they still fit. So I can use them to mount an ARRI rosette or a cold shoe on top for a microphone, etc, etc. Speaking of ARRI rosette mount, since I'm using the Canon Z300 Mark III, it is a very welcome feature that you can detach the side handle, attach it to a gimbal ring, and then control your camera via the side handle. Unfortunately, there isn't really a mounting option for that. I could use the clamp with the ARRI rosette on the bottom or on the top, but it just didn't feel right from the positioning of the side handle. But that's where the remote comes in place, because the remote has NATO rails on either side. So in theory, you can use a NATO rail to ARRI rosette adapter and then attach your side grip directly onto the gimbal, and that should make for a very cool setup. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to test that, and I will probably not bring out a part 4 of the DJI RS2 because after this I'm done with it. But if you're interested in seeing that because it's really niche, make sure to follow me on Instagram, because I'll be doing a lot of behind the scenes and first looks and smaller things that won't make it into an entire YouTube video on my Instagram channel. Another really cool thing about the top handle attachment is that it comes with a cold shoe, so you can actually use an external monitor and just directly place it on top. And I found this positioning to be very good, because when I'm using a swivel arm from SmallRig, and I will link this one down below, I can actually change the positioning either if I'm shooting low on the ground or if I'm shooting high up, and it makes for quick changing of angles with your external monitor. And I really found this positioning of the external monitor to be nearly perfect. And for all of you asking, the external monitor that I've been using with the EOS R5 as well as the Canon Z300 Mark III is the Fieldworld GLUT 6S, because that is very bright for outdoor use, and we were shooting in midday sun and I had no problem of framing my shots or even judging the exposure. So this is a monitor I really like. I will also link this one down below, but overall with a setup like this, I feel like you could even go 7-inch if you wanted to. One more thing to say about the design is its feet. It has these extendable feet on the bottom where you have to press a button and then they extend out, which I really like, because that way they are actually fixed in place if you want to stow them away for transportation. And here is another point that I want to make, because I really like this setup, because for a lot of my shoots I don't like to come with different suitcases, pelly cases, backpacks, all that kind of rubbish, and I like to travel as light as possible. So for our test shoot, I actually detached the entire ring with the gimbal to my backpack, and that actually worked pretty well. So overall, in my backpack I had the Canon C300, the EOS R5, 4 or even 5 lenses, a little bit of audio equipment, batteries, and I had the entire ring setup attached to my backpack. So overall, this makes for really light traveling, and I was actually riding my bike to the location. So when it comes to design, I really love it. I have no complaints. When you put it down on the ground, it feels very sturdy, even with a heavy setup like the Canon C300 Mark III. It's absolutely lightweight, and it just feels like very high quality. So when it comes to the design, the build quality, it's a 10 out of 10 recommend for me. But now let's talk about the actual smoothness and usability of the ring. I was using it with a Canon C300 Mark III. Honestly, a lot of the times I will probably be using this with the EOS R5 because I think the EOS R5 makes for a really great gimbal cam, but I figured if it works with the Canon C300 Mark III, it'll work with pretty much any other camera too. The setup I was running was the Canon C300 Mark III stripped down. I used a BP830 battery, that is the small ones, for clearance on the back, but I also had my full frame camera V-mount plate attached on the back of the camera. As for the lens of choice, I used the Sigma 18-35, so overall a pretty big and heavy setup. When balancing, I had to move the camera a little bit back and forth to find the perfect balance position, but when I was finally done balancing everything, which really didn't take a lot of time, I had clearance almost everywhere. The only thing I couldn't do was tilt the camera up to basically the sky, because then there were a couple millimeters missing for the clearance. But then again, like if you were to do this, that really wouldn't make any sense, because then you would have the bar of the ring in your shot and you really wouldn't do this anyway. But for my actual shooting in all kinds of modes, and we were using the follow mode, the pan follow mode, as well as the POV mode, and I had absolutely no problem of just having enough clearance to any sides, even when I was doing some fast movements. So that is a way better setup than using the Canon C300 Mark III on the RS2 alone. When using the Canon C300 on the RS2 alone, and I was already talking about this in one of my part 1 or part 2 reviews, you don't really have enough clearance, because with the one-handed setup, if you want to do low shots, you kind of tend to just tilt the gimbal forwards, and then you're kind of missing out on clearance. And with this one, it's way easier because you can just easily go down into low mode. And even though you do have the ring around and you can't go into underslung technically, you can still get very close to the ground. And unless you're doing a very specialty shot that needs to be hovering just a couple centimeters off the floor, then you can actually go pretty low pretty easily. And that's what is totally satisfactory for me. Generally, when shooting with this, we were shooting in 25 frames, 50 and 100 frames, but even when shooting fast-paced action like music video or a girl running, it's so smooth. It's so easy to maneuver this gimbal, and even when shooting in POV mode, which is something I like doing because it gives this whole thing more of a Steadicam flow and these kind of natural flowing aesthetics to it, it's so much easier to keep the horizon level if you do have a bar in front of you than just with a one-handed gimbal where you pretty much never know where the horizon actually lies. So for this kind of shooting, I really prefer a ring setup. I also couldn't really see any micro jitters, and I already talked about this in one of my reviews that I think that the micro jitters mainly come from the original base plate, which just sucks. And with the ring setup, everything was really smooth. I used it in different kind of scenarios. If the C300 paired with the RS2 is the perfect setup for really high-paced action or just strapping it to a car, maybe not, but that's not what I do most of the times. I usually use this gimbal just to get some smooth follow shots, following a person, or just even some music video type choreography, dance moves and stuff like this. And for this, it was totally smooth and I really liked it. So again, I can really recommend it. And although we were only shooting for about an hour or so, I felt like the entire setup was so much easier to carry, even than carrying the camera itself handheld, because the weight distribution, having both handles symmetrically to either side, just gives you so much more flexibility and just isn't as draining on your body as it is just holding it awkwardly with both hands above each other. So overall, I really like this, and I can't stress this enough. And this is pretty much the setup that I have been waiting for. So right now, the DJI RS2 with a Tilta ring is definitely my favorite setup and go-to gimbal work from now on. And by the way, I have not been paid in any kind of way from Tilta, and I actually paid for this by myself, so just so you know. So, I really don't think there's so much more to say about this ring. I love it, I recommend it. If you want to check it out, there's a link down in the description below. And again, if you're already here, follow me on Instagram for more up-to-date behind the scenes. And if you really like this review, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more. And I hope to see you on the next one.
Mami, muévete, que tu avalao te ha dicho otra vez que tu mala santa ya sabe cómo es, cómo es. Y la santa canta, todo el mundo de pie. Mami, muévete, que tu avalao